Welcome to the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast, where we simplify the complexities of your leadership journey. So, this year, remember that our focus is on one powerful theme. So, identity and influence, because you can't influence what you haven't first identified, whether it's in yourself or in others. Insight. Also, subscribe to our channel. Subscribe to us on Apple, on YouTube, on Instagram, on Netflix. Just kidding, not on Netflix, but Netflix. If you're listening, you want to sponsor us, we'd love it. But as always, I am Scott, and with me is the brilliant leadership strategist, Dr. Michael David Morales, known to many as Mo.
Scotty, what's up, man? I am excited about what we're talking about today. So I don't even know what story you're going to give me. So that's always my favorite part. Let's do it.
Well, it is a story about one of my favorite leadership individuals. So, as you know, every year I read what is my leadership Bible, and that is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, the book that started my leadership journey and changed everything for me. And so this just kind of comes from that. And so one of the things that Jocko just often talks about is the shift he made from being a frontline SEAL platoon commander to leading at a higher level. So early on, he tried to lead kind of that new role just in the same way he always had. Direct involvement, constant oversight, being the first to act, the last to step back, kind of like what you would expect from a Navy SEAL. So under pressure, he just really defaulted to what had always worked before. But the environment naturally had changed. So he wasn't in the same space that he was. The team was much larger. The decisions were much broader. And instead of speeding things up, his presence actually was starting to slow people down, which if you have spent any time listening to any Jocko Willink, then you would know that that is not him. But what he realized was uncomfortable, but really critical, that his leadership hadn't gotten worse. It just hadn't adapted. So he was still a great leader at heart and down to his core, but he just hadn't adapted to the situation that he was in. And the traits that made him successful on the ground were actually becoming limitations at the next level. So he really had to learn to step back, ask better questions, because good leaders ask good questions, and trust leaders beneath him to execute. So same standards, same discipline, same ownership, but different behaviors. So leadership didn't mean doing more. It actually meant enabling more. And the lesson is clear. So when your role changes, your leadership must evolve with it. If you cling to this is how I lead mentality, you become the constraint. So adaptable leaders identify what the moment requires and adjust without compromising their values. So new role, same leader, but only if you're willing to change how you lead. And that's really kind of what we're diving into today, and which is critical because, start of the year, we're only into February here, and people might be taking on a new role. So people might be starting something new, and they might take that, I know how to lead, I'm going to step into this role, I'm going to do the same thing. But today we're talking about how that's not necessarily the case, and how sometimes we have to adapt what we are doing. And so Mo, what are your thoughts after kind of that opening intro?
Well, my first thought is I love Jocko, not as much as you do. Obviously, you get that award, but I do love, and I've read all of his books as well. And one of, or two of my favorite quotes are when he said, hey, I used to lead by being the best operator, but I had to learn how to lead by thinking, how do I make my team better? And that was probably the biggest shift that he had to make. Didn't change his identity, like you said. He still had the same discipline and the accountability, but his behavior shifted from having to control. And let's face it, when you're an operator, it's all about control. You want to control the situation, but he had to move from control to empowerment. And so he went from being the best doer and became somebody who gave clarity and alignment. And so that actually moves Scotty right into what we're talking about today, right? New role, same leader, how to adapt well this year. And our first point is this: role clarity is a leadership skill. You can get better at it. And so, Mo, what's the big idea? Well, the big idea is this: adaptable leaders don't wait for clarity. They actively seek, shape, and even renegotiate it. So leaders, where are you in your role? So you might be sitting in a cubicle. You might be standing out on a field. You might be going door to door as part of a sales team. Whatever it is, you are the one who is responsible and accountable for your clarity in your positions. What do I mean by that? Well, most leadership frustrations, Scott, come from role confusion. When people don't know what they're doing, when your people don't know what you're doing, they are going to be confused and they're going to be frustrated. Think of the opposite of having that clarity, which would be role ambiguity. And so role ambiguity is one of the most consistently studied stressors and organizational psychology. They keep wanting to know more about it. They, meaning the experts. In fact, research going all the way back to 1964 on role theory shows us that when expectations are unclear, individuals get stressed out. They have lower job satisfaction and they have reduced effectiveness. So if you're a leader out there and you know somebody at your job who is experiencing one of those three, the stress, the lower satisfaction at their job, or even the reduced effectiveness in what they do, they probably have some kind of role ambiguity. So even studies today, one of my favorite journals to read, if you like to be a big nerd like I do and read journals, there's one called the Journal of Organizational Behavior. And in that, it confirms that role ambiguity directly correlates with emotional exhaustion and disengagement. So, leaders, who on your team has been exhausted or disengaged? And more importantly, when is the last time in your role, now or in the past, have you been exhausted or disengaged? Because I would bet that it has a little bit to do with maybe some ambiguity in what you are supposed to be doing in your role.
That's such a critical idea. It always makes me think of the example where you have those zombie movies and the character rounds the corner, and he comes upon just this group of zombies that's just standing there. Like they don't know what their role is. They don't know what the expectation is. But then they see someone, and then it's like now we understand what our role is. So that role, that expectation becomes clear,
Yes.
and then chaos ensues, and they run after someone. But it's so critical not only in role, but you said it yourself, like expectations. Jocko talks about standards, and so does Andy Stanley, so does Simon Sinek. Like they all talk about setting standards and making sure those standards, those expectations are clear. Because when it gets muddied, whether it's the role, whether it's expectations, the standards, it's hard to navigate a workplace when you don't know what the standard is. How do you meet a standard? How do you meet an expectation? How do you do your job when you don't understand what you're actually supposed to be doing?
Yeah, and Scotty, that actually, funny enough, leads to my second point, which is every role changes. And when it does, there are hidden gaps in those expectations. So, when is the last time that your role changed? Because when it did, there were probably some gaps in the expectations. Meaning, if you get a promotion at work, if you get what they call a lateral promotion, which essentially probably means that you were given more responsibility at the same level of pay, you probably were thinking to yourself, oh, this is great. And then okay, well, what does that mean now for what I have to do? Those are the gaps. So leadership
Hmm.
transitions are going to disrupt identity, meaning your identity and the expectations that you have, and they're going to do it at the same time. And so another one of my journals that I read, which is called Leadership Quarterly, and it talks about leadership every quarter. It shows that role transitions require both behavioral and cognitive adaptation. What does that mean? Leaders who don't consciously reframe their role are going to tend to default to familiar behaviors. They go back to what's comfortable, even if it doesn't help the situation, even if those behaviors are no longer effective in the role that they do. So, what you defaulted back to that kind of helped you get in line at one level may not work and at the next level. And so, in fact, the Harvard Business Review has talked about leadership transitions in one of their articles that they call the first 90 days. And in this article, it showed that there are a ton of leaders that would fail, not due to lack of skill, but because of the misalignment of expectations. And Scott, you know whose fault that is? The leader's fault.
Everything rises and falls on leadership. But this actually reminds me of, you were talking about that. It reminds me of a previous job that I had where, I ended up getting, passed over for a promotion, but I ended up still kind of getting a promotion at the same time. I didn't get the big promotion, but I got a different promotion. But in essence, it was kind of a lateral promotion because in kind of a different way where it came with a salary adjustment, but it didn't come with additional responsibility. In that I was asked and I said, okay, great. Yeah. New title, new everything. Okay. What has changed? And it was like, well, essentially we expect you to take on more responsibility. Okay, great. And I asked, what does that mean? And the response I got was, well, we expect you just to take on more responsibility. And I said, that's awesome. Could you detail that for me?
Yes.
We just expect you to take on more responsibility. And I still, to this day, have no idea what that means. And to this day, from that job, like that previous job, I still don't know from that previous job what those expectations were. I continue to be in that job and I continue to work hard and I got great performance reviews, but I could not for the life of you tell me what or tell you what that extra responsibility that I was supposed to be doing with that quote unquote promotion was. Have no idea.
Yeah. Well, Scott, you and I have talked about, well, I mean, all of your leadership journey for the past decade or more than a decade. And our second section actually is what you and I have been doing for a long time. And I would say that our leaders need to focus on that. And here it is: adapting without losing yourself. That has been part of your journey. It's been part of my journey at times. Leaders has probably been a part of your journey. And if it hasn't, it will be. And this is what I mean by that: identity provides stability, adaptability, and it's also going to provide more effectiveness in what you do. So you need to learn to lead up, lead down, and lead across your organization. And I'll just break it down like this: leadership is contextual, it's not static, it's not going to work the same everywhere you're at. And so there's a theory called meta leadership theory. And this shows that when leaders operate within webs of influence and not within the hierarchies, that defines them as a leader. To be an effective leader, you have to consciously adjust your communication, your decision framing, your behavior, depending on the direction of influence that you have. So are you working with peers? Are you working with people that are looking to you for answers? Or are you looking to those who are your bosses? So let's start with leading down. Leading down, meaning people rely on you to give them vision. Leading down focuses on clarity, psychological safety, and development. It's your job to be clear, to bring safety to your team, and to develop that team. Leading up, which is one of my favorite things to study, requires sense making, framing, and trust building. There's a great book, Scott, that we've talked about a lot on this podcast. And leaders, if you have not read the book by Michael Useem called Leading Up, you need to read that. He talks about sense making. What's going on? What does my leader need from me? Why do I not feel like I know what's happening or the way we're going? You're trying to make sense. That way you can move into framing. Okay, now I know these things. This is how I have to frame it. This is how I need to do it and where I need to go. And then that leads to trust building. You need to build trust up, and you need to help your leader build trust down to trust you. And the last one is this: leading across the organization depends on influence rather than authority. So there might be, if you're working in at an institution like higher education, you might be in the science department, but you need to go see all the other people. And there's the math department, and there's the agricultural department. Well, you don't have any direct authority over any of those people, but they're your peers, and you need to have influence over them because there's probably a pot of money, and we all need to know what to do with that pot of money or those decisions that make the decisions. And this is where the matrix organization is really important, meaning lateral leadership is only going to succeed when you know that you can invest in these relationships, you can have shared goals with your peers, and build credibility rather than positional power, because you don't have any of that. So leading down, leading up, and leading across.
Yeah, I think too often people only view leadership as leading people underneath them. And, they look at it as like from a coaching perspective, right? Like you coach those that are underneath you. And they often forget that you can have influence on those that are at the same level as you, your peers, but additionally, you can't influence those above you. There's so often that I run into individuals, even as an athletic trainer, right? Like, athletes who complain about a coach or something like that. I was like, "But you talk to him. No, why would he listen to me? Well, why wouldn't he listen to you? Like if that coach is truly beyond just a coach and is actually a good leader, he's going to care what you have to say. You obviously can't go into that meeting with the coach and, berate that individual and tell him you're doing everything wrong. There's a right way and a wrong way to go about it. And you see him talks about that in his book, but at the same time, you can lead up that chain. You can have influence over your coworkers, over your peers, over another department on campus or whatnot, another department at work or whatnot. I think people often forget that.
Yeah, and I want to talk about adapting without losing yourself in just one last point, which is this: adaptability is maturity. It's not inauthenticity. It doesn't mean that you're going to fake it till you make it. I don't necessarily even know if I believe in that or not. I just know that you have to continually adapt. I do believe in that, because adaptive leadership is consistently linked to effectiveness, especially in volatile environments, meaning other people are getting frustrated, things are changing. The only constant is change. And if you can learn how to adapt within that, there's a ton of research out there that says that leaders who can demonstrate behavioral flexibility while still maintaining their values, that's going to make them more trustworthy. And people are going to follow you if you're more trustworthy. So don't be rigid. If you're rigid, it's a sign that you're feeling threatened. It's not about principles. Somebody will say, well, I'm going to stand on my principles. No, there's times if it's threatening your ethics or your morals, yeah, be rigid, stand strong, don't budge. But if you're thinking, well, this is the way we're supposed to do things because, well, think about the because. What's coming after that? Why do you really need to be rigid? Because identity anchors behavior and adaptability adjusts expression. And so my hope for our listeners is that they would be anchored in their identity, which is going to cause them to behave in hopefully the right ways. And then when they can be adaptable, it's gonna help people see, wow, Scott really cares about me. Scott's willing to adjust and move things around to help the situation. That's what leadership's all about.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd even take it one step further too, where adaptability equals humility. Being adaptable as a leader also can show
It does.
humility, which is a key characteristic of being a leader. But Mo, before we kind of jump off today, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Yeah, I want to start out with a question. Here's the question, leaders. Where might you be protecting your comfort under the banner of authenticity instead of adapting for effectiveness? Meaning, where are you being rigid and saying, I'm just comfortable being here. I don't want to change things. And I don't really want to adapt because I'm telling you, if the answer is you're trying to stick with the old, it's probably affecting the way that you are leading people. And so remember this, role clarity and adaptability are mutually reinforcing. When you are clear on your expectations, when you're able to adapt, it's going to make you a better leader. Without clarity, leaders guess. And we never want to be in the guessing game as a leader, right? They always tell lawyers, don't ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. And I always tell leaders, don't respond unless you already know what you're going to say. And if you don't, I went into this in depth in our January episode, so I'm not gonna hit it a ton now, but I will say this. Leaders, you need to flesh out all the circumstances in your mind so that you know how to be adaptable and you know how to work with your people to build a strong foundation, which is going to give you sustained influence, meaning influence in the long haul. And lastly is this, adaptive leadership isn't situational, okay? And it's compromise, right? Adaptive leadership happens all the time, but it's about intelligence. It's about learning to be a better leader. It's about learning systems leadership. It's about being able to manage when things change, and it's continually reintegrating with the role that you have and all the people on your team. Because as the context evolves, you have to evolve with that. That's going to make you a better leader.
Great way to finish there. Well, everybody, we appreciate you spending part of your day with us. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate, review, subscribe. It truly helps more and more people discover the show, which is the ultimate goal. And remember to swing by rtclc.com, join our monthly newsletter, sign up for that, get exclusive tips and deeper insights that you guys won't hear on the podcast. So until next time, lead with purpose, stay authentic, and make an impact.